All right, so let's pop this into presentation mode. So hopefully you guys can all see this nicely. Just give me a shout if you can't. So 20 minutes when this session, as Sarah mentioned originally, was at the Tableau conference, and it was tough to kind of squeeze everything into that point as well, let alone now. So this may be a little bit fast paced, but I've got all of my contact details at the end. Great for protection, so opening myself up, but will happily answer questions every single day of the week on training and Tableau and all good things. So if you're stuck, let me know. And I'm even accessible by WhatsApp, as Matt Francis knows all too well when he's in the middle of a training session and has a quick question. So let's get into, first of all, well, what do we actually mean by training? Because this means different things to different people. And I think when it comes to Tableau, we mean something a little bit different when it comes to training than just something. Because it's not just one thing. You don't magically just learn Tableau. That's not the only thing that we cover off when we talk about Tableau as a tool as a whole. We actually mean a whole load of sub-skills, going all the way from data architecture, working with data in databases and Excel sheets, CSVs that are floating around, even doing that extract, transform, and load originally to get hold of the data in the first place, through to what most people commonly think of as Tableau. So this visual analytics piece where we're actually kind of in the tool and building those charts and graphs and the dashboards and the analysis. But we all know that the icing on the cake, and actually to truly get people using Tableau and the tools that we actually create and the visualizations, is actually the UI over the top of it. The design, that user experience has to be spot on to create a truly great piece of work. And when we talk about training Tableau, we have to actually mention all of those elements and train different bits of those elements. So when I get questions around, oh, cool, we can just have a full introduction in just one day, it's like, yes, we can have an introduction, but we're not going to be able to teach you that full skill set in a day or even just in a couple of days. You're looking at a long progression over time. So let's keep that in the back of our heads. And on that note, that long progression, practice is needed. I think you can see just through the quality of the community how much things like Makeover Monday and Workout Wednesday, the IronViz feeder competitions, etc., make a massive difference in terms of producing better and better quality outputs. If you really want your champions and experts to become great at the tool, they're going to have to be in the tool regularly and using it a lot. It doesn't happen magically. Rocky didn't become a champion without working hard continually at that. And Allen Iverson's famous practice rant wasn't really about practice. He dug his hours into the gym to become one of the greatest players despite his size. So it can come from anywhere. But if you're willing to practice, that's really adds on top of that training. And also quality, not quantity, I think is a really big part of this overall thing. I hear often that someone's been using Tableau for X amount of time. It doesn't really mean anything. To see the quality that someone's coming out with, you've got to go and see what they're actually able to do. Again, Tableau is a visual tool. We all have our portfolios through Tableau Public, or just actually our internal work. So if you're trying to work out what training is needed, go and actually see what someone's doing. More to that a little bit later. So what type of training is actually available from Tableau at the moment? Well, there's one that we commonly think of quite a lot, and that's probably our classroom-based training. So there's the official Tableau courses out there. Lots of different Tableau partners offer slightly different flavors of this, or introductory days to feed into those official courses. But we kind of imagine having a room in front of us as trainers as we deliver some content. Thank you, Data School 6, for kind of posing for that photo down in the bottom left, especially Lee, who's looking very attentive. Those official courses are brilliant. The amount of time and hours that have gone into the build of those is huge. And I think anybody who's lucky enough to train those sessions out really understands how well they flow and the good content that's actually in there. And it's a true basis for really getting started with Tableau and going and designing out those skills. It's not to say they're fully complete. There are other elements that you'd want to cover as well, which is where we get into self-design training. And I would generally say it's hard to get right. It's hard to really hit the nail on the head with it and make the investment in building all of your own stuff right for in a classroom setting. It takes a lot of time. It takes more time than you actually think. If anyone wants to discuss this with me, I'm really happy to, because I always kind of flip-flop around this session around, yeah, we can build out loads of great material. Oh, it's going to take quite a while to do that. But actually teaching in the classroom is so much easier and so much enjoyable when you can see the body language and the feedback that you actually get. But Tableau training isn't just about these official courses in the classroom. The way I learned originally was looking at Tableau's videos. They're a great online resource, let alone what the community has then added in as a whole as well. I think every blogger out there has done a video or two, whacked up on YouTube, and it answers pretty much every question under the sun, but that's quite a lot to work through if you're going to do that. And the same with blogs and articles. Lots of step-by-step guides, all helping us learn this kind of range of skills that are evolved in Tableau. My advice would be follow some of your favorites and they'll link you out into other good material as well. If you try and cover everything, you're probably going to drive yourself and build up from there. It's allowed me such a luxury. Was actually going to take 5 of your favorite Tableau public visualizations, rebuild them from scratch, and you'll learn what you know, what you don't know, and then you can get curious about why certain things are happening, and you'll dig into that really, really well over time. So let's get into the tips with no further ado. So the way this works is the way I designed it for the conference was I'd put up a warning, we'd have a bit of discussion around why that would be an issue within training, and then we'd kind of flip back to actually kind of talk through the tips. That's not going to work for you guys on the chat quite so well. And also with time pressures, I'm just going to flick through them pretty quick. So warning number 1, I did actually have to ask the data school to pose for this photo. This isn't the result of one of my normal trainings, but everyone's kind of asleep, disengaged. They took this really well and modeled this really well. Maybe they had some trainings with Andy just before. Get the right people in the room is tip number 1 from me. Whether you're talking about execs, whether you're talking about analysts, different people will have different needs and you'll need to pitch the training at different levels. Also, the amount of experiences somebody has, whether they're a data person or not a data person, is also really key in my opinion. Trying to find that balance between somebody walking into the room to learn another business intelligence tool versus actually showing why this is different and probably why you guys are spending your Fridays listening to people like me do the talks on the Tableau Fringe Festival. This thing is a bit different. We need to kind of change it away from just being about data. Also, the right levels of expertise. I think we've all been there in training sessions where we feel like we know it already, and you're just kind of preaching to either the converted already or to somebody who knows something. Or you pitch something that's just way too hard and you make something seem so much harder. We always talk about Tableau being this kind of easy to pick up tool, but we know there's a lot of complexity there. So getting that right is really tough. But most importantly, about getting the right people in the room is those with that desire to learn. If you have people with a desire to learn and you kind of win their hearts as well as their minds, we'll come back to that a little bit later, but you can really make a massive difference and they're going to go and learn more off the back of your training session. You're just kind of laying the seed. They need to go and do those hours of practices, all of those different iterations to really master this tool. So go and win that heart and you'll kind of get it rolling from there. Next up, warning number 2, which I think most people guessed right at the conference, which is, the right tool for the job. I would say that you can't get a screw into a piece of wood using a hammer. The answer is yes, you can if you hit it hard enough. No, that's not what I'm saying as tip 2, hit your students. It's use the right material at the right time. Not everybody needs to know a nested level of detail calculation or get back into the old school dialog box for table calculations. That's just making this tool seem unwieldy and horrible and inaccessible. Really what we love about Tableau is so much of it is user intuitive. Make sure you're starting there and showing that progression over time. You might need to know nested level of detail to table calculations down the end, nested level of detail calcs and table calcs further down the line, but you won't need to know them probably for your day 1 sessions. So show that clear progression of skills. And on that thought, you guys probably might not know who this guy is, but it's Greg Popovich. So he's the coach for the San Antonio Spurs, my favorite basketball team. And he's renowned for having the most convoluted playbook in the NBA. So it has a huge amount of detail and it takes years to pick up the system. But what Pop does is he picks up players who are kind of rejects from other teams. So how do the two things work out successfully? Well, where he starts is actually working from the ground up. That he gets people to buy into the philosophy first and then starts the introductory teaching. So it's expanding through teaching, because once you have the philosophy and once you have those fundamentals in place, you can then really kick on from there. It prevents Tableau seeming hard, because if you show the easy bits first and then slowly expand out from teaching, that makes really so much more sense, and actually so much more sense for the user too. Pop introduces those harder plays later in the year as players are more comfortable in the system. If you make people comfortable in the tool first of all, you're going to be winning however you're teaching and whatever else you're teaching. Warning number 4, beautifully modeled by Will. It's not how many books that you can hold up at any one point or how much reading you have to do. It's don't try and teach everything to everybody. I'm yet to find a company that has an unlimited training budget. Even though I used to work for a big bank, there were limits on what we had and what we didn't have. I had half a day's training. You know, that's with crazy amounts of money kicking around in banking, right? Not. So how do you get that right bang for the buck? And it's by not trying to teach everything to everybody. Go and understand somebody's job role. Sit on their shoulder, see what they're doing with their current analytics or their current data work, and you'll soon understand what they're likely to need you to teach, and also where their growth areas will be. So if you work with your students, you can really make a huge amount of difference with that. Number 5, no, it's not about creating different random cycling visualizations, because I'm sure that will bore most people to sleep, but get past visiting Superstore. I still trying to avoid Superstore when I'm doing my intro into Table Calc or into Tableau as a whole. Making the session more interactive, more engaging in terms of winning hearts and minds is absolutely key. So if you can use the subjects that you care about, you're going to talk more passionately about them. It's going to be something different for the students to walk into the room on. They're not going to kind of come in and think this is just another BI tool. You're going to show them something a little bit different. Lots of people may have watched the Tableau content before or read a couple of blog pages or just read bits and pieces that are kicking around in the community that might mention Superstore. So it kind of loses the wow factor and the pop factor. So I just thought I'd take a few little extracts from my introduction to kind of show what I'm doing and why. And I kind of show everybody where I start with Tableau. That I started with a horrendous scatter plot that I still look back at now. We just had a little chat in the kind of chat box here that go back and look at your early Tableau public work and realize how far you've come. My tree map is floated up in the top right-hand corner, so we missed the crazy outline player up in the top right. Yes, I could have done multiple options for drop-down boxes rather than full lists. Lots of things I could improve on this. But Tableau allowed me to answer that first question, that I wanted to go and ask more about it. So how could I do better deep dive basketball analysis? So I wanted to get as close as I could do to Kurt Goldsberry's work. While my first view wasn't great, it was just a traditional shot chart, a little bit dull, a little bit boring. But then I slowly worked through the iterations, adding in more context. I learned how important context was. And in the end, I created my moving scatter plot, i.e. my player on the basketball court, working through each individual play, and then using hex bins to really analyze where players were spending most of their time when they were doing better or worse. And if you've come in through a training session with me and you've suddenly seen this as the first real content that we go through and talk about and why I love the tool and why I find the tool so useful, it's not about let's go and do some basketball analysis. It's about you can manipulate this tool to do whatever you want it to do. And it's got some great ways that's going to lend itself to do that. You're not talking about Superstore. You're going to get to that. You're actually just winning that heart in the first place, which means people are more likely starting to think around, well, what could this thing be for me? How could I do this? How can I move this on? So that becomes just a more fun conversation, and you see kind of quite a few eyes light up in the room. But warning number 6, don't ignore Superstore. What you're doing with training isn't doing someone's work for them. What you're actually doing is you're teaching the techniques. And if people are leaving the room without mastering the techniques, then you haven't effectively trained them. What you're trying to do is just kind of go over what Tableau does. So Superstore is brilliant because it disconnects the user from their current issues a little bit. You're showing the techniques. Superstore is a perfect data set for that. I've not found many data sets where you can really get into those details without kind of covering this. It saves you a whole load of prep time. I often get questions around, well, I'd like the training to be about my data because that's the only thing my users will understand. It's really not. If your users don't understand the techniques of what you're trying to get across in your training, you're kind of missing the point with the training. You can always do an extra follow-on day where you're really getting in and actively applying those techniques into somebody's data, or break the training down and do training in the morning, then apply in the afternoon. It's a technique we use at the data school quite a lot. So it saves that prep time. It saves that kind of diversions and tangents that you can get into. If I use somebody's data and put their sales data up on the screen, I think we'd have at least a 30, 40-minute conversation around why is the sales number what it is? What time period is it looking at? Whose sales have you included? Who haven't you? Is it sensitive data? Are we allowed to talk about it at all? You know, you're going down a rabbit hole that's completely distracting from why you're there. Stick to Superstore when you're training techniques. Win the hearts and minds on the other fun data first. Go back to the work context a little bit later on. Tip number 7. This will show my age a little bit and some of your ages out there as well. Why have I got Arnie and Danny here? They're in a film called Twins. Yes, you can tell they're identical twins. Get multiple teachers involved. Everybody has their own style and engages different people in a different way. You know, every teacher has their own pacing. You'll have all have had a teacher back at school and university which you just liked, you understood the way that they were trying to get stuff across. You will have probably differed a little bit more from your friends around some of those teachers and who they might have been and who they might not have been. So getting different people involved throughout that training is really useful. I don't mean you have to get 8 people in across the 2-day training, but if you're doing multiple sessions, get people involved throughout those different sessions. Also, everybody has their own hints and tips. It's not just Lorna and her hints and tips that are just kind of flying around the internet. You know, everybody has their own slightly different way of doing something. That's really important. And that last point, for those of you who have been in multiple training sessions, you don't have to hear 10 hours of my jokes. That's really where the get multiple teachers involved comes from. Warning number 8, again, I used these slides in Vegas, first of all, so I believe it's law that we still have to use this sign in some way or another. It's a pretty obvious one, slow down. Ironically, with trying to squeeze this 30-minute plus talk into 15 minutes, I'm not exactly going slow. But pacing in trainings is a real key one. I think anybody who does a good bit of training will talk to each other about pacing and how do you get that right pace and how much time do you spend on this or how much time do you spend on that. Well, even before we get to the content, what you've got is classroom management. And that's really tough when you have somebody there who's rolling their eyes or yawning because they've just had a massive night out before. It becomes pretty problematic to get that right. So if you can get people to the point where you're talking to the group and you're ignoring those weird individuals who aren't being respectful or aren't really in the right mindset to do that training right there, right then, that would be really key to kind of get past that. So I try and teach to what I often class as about 85%, 90% of the class, and I'm always going to have some extremes. I'm going to have a yawner who thinks he knows it all already. Happy to shoot that down with extra exercises or get them to support the slowest members of the group if that works quite nicely. But sometimes you just kind of need to go and take them to the side if they're being really disruptive. But base your pacing on the group. Don't just go and try and please that one individual that's trying to show that they know it all, because in all honesty, they probably don't. And also, as you train more and more, ultimately what you're doing is practicing. We said that training is about practicing. Well, we train to become trainers, and that involves practice, practice, and practice some more. And you'll soon find your pacing to get it right. Warning number 9. It's a fun one. It's a distraction. Web-based training. We talk about this over a web-based conference. You know, I've probably lost 90% of you already to that email that's just pinged in, or the fact that your boss just came around, tapped you on the shoulder and said that they're going to buy lunch today. Maybe that's not everybody's boss, sorry. But eyeballs really are better than webcams. If you can get people in a room, it's going to make that training so much more effective because you get people talking to each other a lot more. Plus people, it's easy to keep their attention. On webcams, it's hard. If you do have to do virtual training, if you've got teams based all over the world and you haven't got those budgets to travel, there's some challenges there, but break that training down. Tableau takes their 2-day official course and breaks it down into 5 days instead, 2.5 hours a day. And even then, I'm putting a big break in the middle of those 2.5 hours just to give people time to spend looking at emails. So when they're with me, when I'm teaching, they're focused on what they're doing. And number 10, again, I love the Spurs, Tim Duncan, legendary player. But what I'm trying to show here is just get started. Tried to build their own content, and they've written 10 hours of their own training material before they've even gone and tried their first session. Build a session, go and try it, see how it goes down. Is it the right content? Does it make sense? You won't know until you're actually out there trying. You'll learn what doesn't come across clearly and what you've got to refine. And also, don't start with your highest priorities. Go and spend time with the people that kind of know you a little bit already, will give you that feedback around what you're trying to get across. Does it work? Does it not? And then those super users that you absolutely have to create, you're going in there with well-timed training that's paced well, and it's the great content that will help them progress. So they're my top 10 tips when training. Get those right people in the room, and also get the right material to them at the right time. Don't try and do everything at once. Slowly expand through teaching. Don't try and teach everything to everybody. You don't need to. No one's got those unlimited budgets. Get past visiting Superstore. Go and win those hearts. But if you really want to train those techniques, don't ignore having a Superstore there. Also, where you can, get multiple trainers involved. That's really key. When you're actually doing the training, slow down, and if you can, get people into the room. If not, break those sessions down. But most importantly, just get started. And if you have got questions around challenges that you come across, whatever it may be in terms of content, managing classrooms, etc., always happy to chat about it on Twitter. Then everybody gets involved and we get a whole load more learning. Just don't mention names of those difficult students. Or if you want to, you can always drop me an email. We can have a chat about it. So I will just dive up and see if we've actually got any questions. We've got one in the Q&A. Icebreakers, do I use them? I actually don't. I always flip-flop with this. Maybe this is because I'm a skeptical git after all of my years in the corporate setting. I just find we've gone through quite a lot of the best icebreakers. If you want people to get to know each other and you're doing a more advanced class, get somebody to show what they've done in Tableau before and talk through some of the work and what they actually want to get out of those sessions. I think that's really key. One thing I do ask, even of all fundamental classes, is what do you want to get out of this session, but what do you do with data currently? Because quite often I'll never ask somebody's role, because if you ask somebody's role and somebody's the director in the room and everybody else is analysts, you can guarantee no one's going to ask questions because they're going to wait for their boss and try and please their boss. So don't ask about their job role, but do ask about what they want to get out of the session, what they want to do with data, and what they do with data currently, because that'll give you a really good flavor of what you need to train, but also get them talking about themselves. And if you can get them to share previous work, that can really help open up those options to people. So did anybody else have any other questions? I'm just going to try and skim through the chat, but if anyone's got any that they want to shout out, please do.
So Carl, I think it goes from everyone. I think looking at the feedback, that was absolutely incredible, and I think we can all appreciate just why that was so popular at TC17 last year. So thank you. There is one last question, if we can. We've probably just got quick time for it. From Chris, who spoke earlier. So Tableau Deadpool. How well do you think speed training sessions work? 1 hour where you cover one topic.
I think they can work really well. I just think you've got to have a real clear progression within them. So it fits into overall syllabus. If you've won someone's heart, then they're going to take that 1 hour and go and really build on it. If you haven't won the heart yet and you're just trying to teach that one technique and they're not going to do anything else with the tool until you're back in the room doing the next training session, I think that proves to be really tough. And that's, again, if you can get your champions and super users to, if you've got that heart really won, great, you're winning already. Those speed sessions can work really, really well. If you haven't, then you're going to have some real tough challenges off the back of that.
Thank you. So that wraps up Carl's session.